please welcome voice director Sarah Elmaleh.
Oh, goodness. Hi. Good morning. It's still morning. And first, this is a professional compulsion, but my sinuses have been very sad with the dryness, so my voice doesn't normally sound like this. It has a little more clarity, but the words will come out and the ideas will make sense, and we'll get through it. So yes, thank you so much for being here and expressing interest and care around performance and kind of how to reach out and understand your actors a little bit better, to work with them more effectively. That interest and curiosity and respect alone means a lot to me and to your actors. So here we go. The child, the guardian, and the guide. Who am I and how did I get to have so many opinions? I'm full of them. I grew up playing video games. At the time when I started doing this, I was more of a rare species where a lot of voice actors came out of animation or other things that they'd wanted to do. But I think these days, this generation of actors actually largely grew up playing video games and loving them and wanting to do this specifically. But so these were some of my earliest inspirations. I trained in theater in high school and college. Professionally, I started out, you can see, in very, very indie experimental theater. This is me playing a chimpanzee, which I had to explain to Joel McHale. That's a whole other story. He saw it in my Zoom background. And also live radio dramas in New York City, which is where I really discovered the freedom and joy of voiceover, specifically of just channeling everything through my voice. And then I proceeded to dive headlong into indie games once I discovered the breadth and diversity and excitement that was in the space at the time. And I very much lucked out by being part of this one. I moved to LA in 2015. I joined the Actors Union, the American Actors Union, SAG-AFTRA, and started voicing AAA games as well. Things like these. This is Gears 5, Fortnite, and Halo Infinite. So after years of acting in games and learning what I could about game development at GDC, I took myself to GDC since 2011, and on Twitter before it was completely on fire. I started consulting for indies to help them understand better how actors work, the standards and best practices, and which led kind of accidentally. I didn't actually set out to be a voice director, but as part of the ways that I offered to help, I started voice directing for indies and now also for AAA. So this talk is the result of many aspects of training and experience. Firstly, as someone who has played games and carefully followed and studied and been, as a fan of games performance their whole life, as someone who has invested a significant amount of time and in an interest in better understanding the needs and practices of my developer collaborators. That's always meant a lot to me. This is what you're doing for the actor community, is you're coming to learn about us. Well, I spent many years trying to come to developers to learn about how they work. And as an actor, of course, with a lifetime of training and over a decade of experience, as we mentioned, in this specific medium, and now as a consultant and director, this is me being very silly, with the privilege of creating the kinds of collaborative workspaces that I've always dreamed of for actors and developers as a space to create together. So who are you? I understand many of you are students. I'm really, really curious who's here, what your background is, what touch point, if any, you have with voice actors, and I'm very much looking forward to your questions, so write them down. I did leave some space, unless I go wildly off the rails. And I'm not expecting any particular amount of experience or background here, so let's just see what we're dealing with. So raise your hands if the answer is yes. Any writers? I can barely see, but I see a few, yes. Cinematics team? A couple, cool. Audio designers and composers? People who touch audio? Okay, cool. Nice. Awesome. Sweet. Does anybody have already session experience? Being in a voice actor session? Yeah, a couple. Fab. Great. Any directing experience? Nice. Cool. Hopefully this will make sense to you. Does anyone have any acting experience? Bonus round. Ooh, look at all the actors! Ah, that's great. Okay, cool. Hopefully this will also make sense. Fantastic. That's exciting. I love that. Okay, so what are we talking about? My talk title sounds like some weird fairy tale or fable, so let's, what are we doing here? First, I'm going to kind of lay out from my experience what the situation is like in the booth. Not all the time, but some of the time. What are the things we run into, the pitfalls, the things that make games performance both uniquely difficult among kinds of acting and glorious. So here we are. This is my work in progress kind of model. It's based on my years of experience and training, but this is me working out kind of a simple way to put it forward to you. This concept of the actor having dual selves at all times. When you're working with them, they are composed both of an inner child and of an adult guardian, and both are essential for performance. They each have key relationships with you as the director, individually, and with each other. They work together with each other. This is also my personal perspective on the fundamental role of the developer, how to conceive of the job of the developer, or excuse me, the director, who, we can argue about whether it's part of the development team or not. Hopefully, yes, in some form or other. And the tools that we have at our disposal to work with our actors. Because we do work both directly with the child and with the guardian and ask them to kind of talk to each other. And so this is what I'm going to try and get across to you. Then I'll try and sum it up. Hopefully it'll make sense, and we'll all be ready to go forth and have fantastic sessions for the rest of our lives. Okay, so in my experience, voiceover can, not always, but can actually wind up creating, voiceover sessions can create anxiety both for developer and actor alike. So let's get into it. And just to be clear, I'm talking mainly about booth voiceover sessions. Performance capture is similar, although some things are easier, like having scene partners, and some new things are hard as well, just getting used to not occluding your markers and stuff. Booth voiceover, with a head-mounted camera, like for facial capture or not, is still likely, I think at this point in time, maybe this will be an interesting time capsule, likely to be the bulk of your performance process. You may have some very beautiful cutscenes that are done on the performance capture volume, but then you're going to wind up doing a lot of booth voiceover as well. So here's the problem, my interpretation of the problem, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, from your perspective. So usually, you don't have the same amount of time to onboard an actor compared to other members of your team. I'm guessing you spend more than like 5 to 15 minutes in onboarding a developer into your world and to the pillars of your design and getting them up to speed. So that can kind of induce panic if you feel like you only have a little bit of time to get your actor into the mindset that you need them to be in. This is voiceover's reputation as a budget item. It feels like it costs a lot of money. We're going to hang on to that for a minute. I think we can unpack what the value is, which kind of determines that assessment. But this is definitely, I've heard this time and time again, that it feels very expensive, and I respect that. It sounds like reading, because they are reading. Actors are not off-book. Off-book meaning they have their lines memorized. For performance capture, yes, but for booth voiceover, most of the time you're seeing the lines for the first time. You're reading them maybe 3 times in a row, getting an adjustment or a bit of input from the director, and then maybe a few more times, and one of those is going to ship, probably. So if it sounds like reading, it is because it is. Similar, disconnected, sort of not engaged, flat reads. You loved their audition. Their audition was full of life and great choices. But when you get into a long pattern and you're in your session and you're not sure why it's going the way it's going, sometimes this can happen. It doesn't sound like they're relating to other human beings in real time, which is what you want your characters to sound like. As a dev, you're really frustrated by this. And as a player, the experience is of a beautiful environment. We just saw some of the most beautiful environments in today's games. With voiceover that takes you out of that experience. It's distracting and it feels disjointed or false, and that prevents you from experiencing and immersing yourself in the game. I won't throw any particular performances under the bus here, but we've all been there, I think. The challenge, now this is from the actor's perspective. Also, no time to develop character. For theater, we would have weeks of rehearsal to figure out who these people are. And on-camera people usually get time with their scripts, at least. Again, we're coming in, we're reading it for the first time, and a character is expected to spring forth whole cloth. No money. this is a very funny, sad paradox. For actors trying to make a middle-class living on session fees individually, it can be quite a challenge. And so it's very, very unfortunate, I think, that there are these kind of dueling expectations or assessments of the value of this session time for actors. And that is also a whole other talk and a union question, but we won't get into it now. But this is something that your actor may be coming in with. Also, no prep. Again, only in game voiceover do we see the line for the first time and read it, give our best sort of gut reaction to it, and then this is what goes into the game. And I do think this does start to gesture at why game voiceover is kind of efficient for the cost, because how much time and resources and iteration is spent on the same in-game moment with the environments and the animation and all of that other, the design, everything, for an actor to read it in under 5 seconds and for that to go, potentially be good enough to go into the final result. So again, a whole other talk, but that's fine. So, yes, this is a booth. I'm gonna get into, oh right, yes, here we are. The booth, for those who haven't been in a booth, it is a very, very controlled space for minimal input from the outside. There's no light, like a casino. There's glass, there's minimal glass because that's a vulnerability point for sound to kind of come in and ruin the kind of carefully protected dead space that is created. Yeah, for an actor, you come in, you have a microphone here, maybe a couple of microphones, depending on the setup. For Gears, I think we had a couple microphones. And a couple of people that you can maybe see on Zoom or across the glass to the control room. You can only hear them when they choose to let you hear them. Yeah, by design, to protect the quality of the files and of the dialogue, there's minimal input, and this makes for a very sterile room. There's not much to react to here, on purpose. On camera, you get a costume, other people's costumes, lighting, explosions, people. There's so much to just react to reflexively, and even in theater, you get other people most of the time. So. It feels a bit like this. I don't know if anyone's done, this is the only one I could find that wasn't like a woman in a bikini, so forgive our dude here. He's going into a float chamber. Has anyone done this? Yeah. It's okay. I'm gonna tell my experience with this in a minute. But yeah, it's this, it's kind of a room that's a small tank. It's filled with salinated water that's kind of so salty that you feel very weightless. You kind of float without having to do any treading of any water. And it's kind of akin to a booth. So here is the opportunity, why I love game voiceover despite all of the stuff I just described, because I do, I love it, that's why I'm still doing it. So here we are in our booth, it feels claustrophobic and sterile, we're in our little float chamber. My experience of doing this float chamber, you go in there and you know it's gonna be over in an hour in this case, and you have a little panic button, that's like, turn the lights on, I'm freaking out. So I'm in here and I'm like, as long as I have my hand on this button or I can find it, I'll be fine. Whatever happens here, I'll be fine. Immediately lost track of the panic button and start to freak out and just being like searching around. It's not very tall. I'm like, okay, decision point, branching decision path. I can either continue to flip out and end this experience, or I can relax, know it's going to be over in an hour, and see what happens. And what happened for me was actually I started to, the feeling of weightlessness allowed me to kind of visualize what that's, obviously in space you're weightless. And so I just started feeling as though I was actually floating through, this distinct sensation of floating through a starscape. It felt the opposite of claustrophobic. It felt endlessly, infinitely expansive and freeing. And that was really cool. And then it was over and it was fine, I was fine. And the booth can be the same. The booth is also a powerful space that has infinite possibility, depending completely only on your imagination. You can go anywhere, you can be anyone. Despite what I would be cast for on camera, I can voice people that I don't look anything like. And it's a place of power and freedom. So the result for developers, and ultimately for players, when the actor is tapped in, visualizing, immersing themselves, is a performance that brings you, the player, into the experience. I did not plan this, by the way. This is not the morning of Horizon, so this is pure coincidence, except that I love Ashley's performance in this game. I think Ashley Birch does an amazing job. She's an incredible avatar, which I think is a kind of a game's particular job to have, the responsibility of being an avatar and a point of connection and identification for the player. I think she connects you intimately to the circumstances and the stakes of this world. She makes everything feel important and urgent. And so what you have is this beautifully simulated environment with incredible slitherfangs and all kinds of other amazing beasties. And this powerful, authentic, kind of barely processed, if at all, human component that's real. It doesn't have to work at all to sound real because it just is a human voice. And that sells you on the rest of the elements in the space. I teach this as a key responsibility for the game voice actor. The job of a voice actor is to make everything around you sound and feel real. And one of my QueerVox students, QueerVox is an academy that we have for queer voice actors, me and my friend JP Karliak, this is our student Brandon P. Jenkins said, we salivate the experience. It sounds like salivate now that I say it out loud, but salivate. Okay, so the why has to do with this concept that I'm playing with of the actor's dual selves. So why is how actors work. Why do these problems, challenges, and opportunities exist, and how do we navigate them? So let's crack her open and see what's inside. The child. Just kidding. But then once this occurred to me, I couldn't not write this slide in Werner Herzog's voice, so I'm gonna, Acting is fundamentally playing make-believe. Young children invent and invest with high stakes and real emotion in imaginary circumstances. Anyway, that's my bad, Werner. Anyway, but yes, children play make-believe very effortlessly and very fully. They have a very, very vivid imagination. They free associate. They make creative connections between ideas, and they aren't stuck in grown-up logic and procedural kind of what has to make sense. They have a kind of special dream logic that can be really surprising and really fun. And they don't prevent these creative impulses from expressing due to shame or worry until they learn to do that later. All of these qualities are necessary to pretend to inhabit an imaginary world, which is fundamentally what we're asking the actor to do. So here we go. This is the actor's vow. I'm not going to do a whole talk on the method, some of you may have heard of. The actor's vow is written kind of as a dogmatic or a pedagogical mantra by Elia Kazan, very influential director. You may know from things like On the Waterfront, Streetcar Named Desire, etc. Co-founded the Actors Studio in 1947. Which formed kind of an essential HQ for the formalization and propagation of the method. This is this technique that you may have heard actors use. Actors like Marlon Brando and James Dean, Paul Newman, etc., and more into modern times. And this was kind of a massive generational shift forward, or leap forward into much more courageous and realistic acting than what we had seen before. So I'm not method myself, but I happen to use some of the tools that I find really useful. And I ran into this vow in a documentary, and I was kind of stunned. It's amazing. So I will read it out and try not to cry. So it says, I will take my rightful place on stage, and I will be myself. I'm not a cosmic orphan. I have no reason to be timid. I will respond as I feel, awkwardly, vulgarly, but respond. I will have my throat open, I will have my heart open, I will be vulnerable. I may have anything or everything the world has to offer, but the thing I need most and want most is to be myself. I will admit rejection, admit pain, admit frustration, admit even pettiness, admit shame, admit outrage, admit anything and everything that happens to me. The best and most human parts of me are those I have inhabited and hidden from the world. I will work on it. I will raise my voice. I will be heard. Thanks, Elia. This, as kind of a companion piece, is from a podcast that my friend Richard Clark started, all about video game feelings. And we did an episode on anger, because it turns out I put my anger into my performances. Acting is very therapeutic for me and for many people. And so you hear a little bit from me at the end of this podcast, but more importantly, you'll hear from Richard, actually, in his epilogue. And I'm hoping it will play now. Maybe now. Nope. Help me out. Thank you.
There's something a little bit less there's not as overdetermined around creativity, really unbridled creativity. It doesn't know, like when I'm acting, I can't, if I try to tell people this, because especially talk about it, because I think that we're at this moment where AI voices are kind of reaching enough competency, right, to be discussed, to have to talk about them. And to have to advocate for real human beings doing this work. And when you are being really creative as a voice actor, the odds that you know exactly how you're going to sound when you do something are just, I think it's a good sign when you don't know how you're going to sound, when you don't know where you're going, and when you don't know where something came from. It's alive, it's spontaneous, it's like there's something really powerful and unconscious about it.
I don't know how I got this way, to this self-conscious place where I carefully curate my thoughts and emotions before I express them. But I'm wondering if it might be a sign that I don't see the world as a safe place, that I don't feel the freedom to show vulnerability in my default mode. I just want to repeat this thing that Sarah said right there at the end. It's a good sign when you don't know how you're going to sound. She's talking about voice acting there, but I think it applies more generally. To express yourself emotionally, you can't be preoccupied with how you're coming across or what people will think. I do cry sometimes, but rarely around people. My only recent memories of crying is in front of a TV set, and I'll quickly wipe those tears away as soon as my wife turns around and looks at me. She asks every time if I'm okay, and my body and my brain interprets that question, for some reason, as a threat. I've always been relatively effective at eliciting emotion and vulnerability from others, but what I'd like to do here is use this podcast to figure out something trickier. How can I forget myself long enough to let others see me as I am? How can I stop worrying about how I'm going to sound?
I thought that was a very brave ending for his podcast. I was very compelled. And so what we're starting to kind of poke at is the fact that grown-ups hide and edit and self-censor for very, very understandable reasons in order to navigate the world socially and professionally and with any number of goals in mind. We worry about looking foolish or weak, and believing in things that aren't real or allowing our emotions to express at full volume can expose us to ridicule, and we become increasingly aware of that. The method and whatever acting technique that works for folks, any convincing modern acting has to do with systematically, repetitively, ritualistically removing those inhibitions and trusting in a special space that allows you to express with abandon. So something that we're going to hang on to, I just want you to tuck this in the back of your brain, that you can't be fully present and uninhibited while also thinking about how you sound. Part 2, second self. The guardian. I'm kidding, sorry. This is a very white classical art canon thing, but it kind of got at the idea, which is that, yes, inside is also a guardian, a grown-up self, with the specific function of being kind of a cheerleader, a companion, a protector, and a minder for the inner child. The guardian is what makes actors self-possessed professionals who come with their own approaches, their own tools, their own choices and instincts, and their adaptability to feedback. You try to direct a child and it can be challenging, but actors are able to translate and filter this input productively. The guardian allows for craft. Some of this is what we call craft. Analytical technique and emotional tools for emotional access. So much of what we talked about in learning acting technique is finding what helps you get into that space of finding the emotion that feels right for the scene or feels reactive. And actors have a bunch of different tools. I have my own hacks for this stuff, like I mentioned. Some of it's method, some of it's not. So you can summon the right state of being that the scene calls for. Support as well. This is drawing out, so I suppose if tools for emotional access are drawing out the inner child, they're also protecting them and nurturing them both. Well, so this is a story before, during, and after. So at a certain point in my development as an actor, I got very good at like prepping my head game before. Most actors know that it's very productive to think of auditioning not as like, oh, here's my chance to go get a job, but the job itself. The job is auditioning itself. This is my opportunity to inhabit this character, and I should treat it as worthwhile and fun and interesting and validating in and of itself. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna be chill. We're just gonna have fun. It's gonna be great. And then I go in and I'm like being loose. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, sure. You're taking adjustments. I love it. And then I would get home and I would beat myself silly. You know, oh, that was such a stupid decision. Oh God, why am I so awkward? Blah 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 blah. And this anecdote is something that I heard from Jennifer Hale in a class that she was teaching. Jennifer, you may have heard of, and so you've certainly encountered her work. And it turns out also, this is not true of every actor who's gifted at acting, but she's also a very, very wise, generous, and articulate mentor, teacher, and I think she is also directing now. But she put it to me this way. She said, our job is to take out your inner child for this work. You let them into the playpen. And if you take them home and you abuse them, they won't want to come out. So you have to be gentle with yourself when you get home. You cannot forget that stage of the process. You cannot punish that kid, or it's just going to get harder and harder to do the work you need to do. And I found that very intense and very motivating. The Guardian also translates and layers technical or results-based direction into play prompts for the child. So you might have some drier stuff. We're going to get into what these tools are and kind of the languages you're going to use when working with both parts of the actor's self. And the stuff that doesn't make sense or wouldn't make sense to a kid is what the Guardian is going to kind of take, digest, and translate. For example, they can even, if they're feeling like they don't totally understand what it is that you want, the Guardian allows for an actor to create two completely creative, spontaneous, and viable options of characterization or of a line read for you to compare and contrast and say, is this closer to what you want, or is it more like this? That's sort of on a Guardian level of offering you a choice. Did I miss anything? Yeah, that's great. How to work with them. The director as guide and their tools. The trick, this is to put it very, very simply, knowing whether you're addressing the child or the Guardian when you direct and not abandoning the one while making the most of the other is the whole trick of it. Okay, so director as guide. This is how I understand the role of director. Not everyone sees it this way. Some people see it like this. You are this genius, mad genius, sort of poking, prodding, injecting electricity, and extracting a character from this passive actor life form that's waiting for you on the table. I disagree. I think the actor is the mad genius, and you are any number of their assistants. The actor is synthesizing, alchemizing. I mean, maybe it's not, Frankenstein's monster. Maybe it's more like a cauldron, but they're kind of stirring and vibing and whatever, and you are running and bringing them tools. So yeah, they have their own tools and ideas, and you are just there to be exactly what they need you to be. Sometimes you're bringing stuff before they even knew to ask for it. Sometimes they will ask for it. I have been each of these archetypes, and don't get too lost in the plot of Young Frankenstein here, because I don't know how helpful they were, but let's just pretend they were. But I have been the clown to entertain and put the actor at ease, to keep the session energy light and fun. I have been the ditz, who's like not really projecting a kind of aggressive attitude of authority, asking a lot of questions in case someone's ego needs to be flattered and assuaged. And I have been that sort of weird, intense disciplinarian who's maybe not intense, but someone who holds them to a higher standard of what they can be, who believes that we can kind of get to an ever more specific, precise, alive place, and will kind of push them. And who also knows that sometimes what they need is a brandy before retiring. Some warm milk, perhaps. Ovaltine. Anyway, yes. So, you bring in your ingredients, and yes, I'm also in the background as a director, as a voice director specifically, running between two rooms. I'm serving both the developer and the actor and translating between them. So I'm kind of running back and forth and trying to make the most of this session, get everybody what they need. So it's really a service position, is what I'm saying. You are a guide to a path that you cannot walk yourself. So I'm going to pause. Yeah, I know, question mark. This is all sort of high-level kind of hooey-gooey actor stuff, so I'm going to try, and you can make fun of me afterward, to speak a little bit of dev, just to help it make a little bit of sense, perhaps. Acting is emergent, not determinative. It's not a button press for predictable output. It is beautiful, cleverly girded chaos. Actors have intricate, complicated processing, and varyingly chaotic and exciting outputs. Your job is to embrace that process, to surf, and to enjoy it. Or you can also think of actors like your players. The Magic Circle, I know, is a design principle, yes? Are people familiar with the Magic Circle? Anybody? Some. Okay, Magic Circle it actually comes, I think, out of like anthropology and folk traditions, but it basically describes, in some cases, rituals will literally create a circle on the ground, and someone will come in and channel something or do something, and the act of circumscribing that space allows or permits for behavior in that ritual that is not commonplace, that you would never do in normal society. And this is used in our game design as well. We know that actors, certainly most actors are developers, oh my God, players, good Lord, players aren't normally violent in real life. But these magic circles allow for them to express themselves in all kinds of ways that they wouldn't normally. And this is also true of your actors. So remember that float chamber. This is that float chamber experience that goes from claustrophobia to freedom. Freedom is that sense of play and agency and exploration and permission in this magic circle. The permission to risk being vulnerable. So tools that you have as designers, create trust, curiosity, and engagement for your player/actor to allow for high-level expression and agency. Directing the child. So, besides trust and permission, what allows for this transformation of claustrophobia to freedom? So we went from the booth to the starscape. It's visualization. The more detail and vividness in the actor's imagination, the more free, committed, and detailed we can be in performance. I would love to see scans of actors and directors' brains while we do this work, because I bet they are all on fire. My brain feels completely alive with envisioning the world, especially as a director, hearing the actor's performance and putting it into what I'm visualizing as the game world. It's very, very active work. So yes, when the imagination is active, actors are closer to instinctively reacting to their imagination. If you're imagining all of this input, all of the stimuli that's not there in the booth, you can have a much more authentic and alive human reaction to it. That sense of immediate reflex is wonderful for acting. Acting is reacting. Some of you may have heard of this. So in our case, in a very sterile environment like the game voiceover booth, you're reacting to your own imagination. I said we bring them stuff, tools and ingredients. What do we bring? We fill in details of the environment. This is feeding their imagination, feeding their visualization of the space. Colors, smells, the size of the space. Is it dangerous? Is it safe? Is it loud? Is it quiet? Is it bright? Is it dim? Really focusing on their senses. That'll put them in their body, in their imaginary body. That will give them things to react to. If there is no specific example for these things, sometimes I'll turn to developers and be like, so where are they, and what just happened, and who are they talking to? And you're like, and that's fine. That is a games thing. That is another unique quality of games, is that these things can fire in any number of settings. I will make stuff up. I turned to one actor and said, okay, so this is, maybe it's taking place in a menu or whatever, or like it's an ambient dialogue in a home base environment. And I was like, imagine you're giving a confession to your friend who's in a coma, and you're in the hospital and you're at their bedside and you're not sure if they can hear you. What I wanted was that sense of vulnerability and intimacy. And it was something, especially because he does more on camera, that actor really responded to. Put them in their body. We don't have costumes to react to. I might give them a costume. I often change their posture. If they're slumped like this, it's hard to imagine being a king or something. I'm like, please straighten your back. Speak from here. Support your breath. I've given fake, blocking with regards to each other. I've asked people to kind of grab their scene partner by both shoulders and speak close to their face. That creates a specific kind of read. And again, doesn't have to be accurate. I once told an actor who was giving a line read, or giving a read that was it felt like a bit like a garden hose, kind of spraying all over. The energy was kind of flying all over the place. And I was like, point. Tell your friends, we're running out of time. I need you to send that energy directly to your teammate, and that works well. So that's a very efficient way. If you just give a gesture, that takes no time at all, but it can be very evocative. The given circumstances. This is an official actor term instead of my hooey-gooey theory. This is stuff actors are familiar with. Key history. Not all of the history, perhaps. Key history. Relationships. Who people are to each other is so key. What's just happened? Did I just sprint for 5 minutes and arrive and see that my friend has finally catch up to my friends? I need to know that, so I'm out of breath. Things like that. The rules of the game. Turns out acting is a lot like games, because we talked about this magic circle. So much like games. Your acting is strongest when you're doing things to other people, when you have an objective. You can give them a verb, give them a mechanic. Say persuade that person with reason. Get this commitment from somebody without showing them how afraid you are. Get this confession out before you lose your courage. Convince, seduce, all of these other things. Verbs are very, very strong direction. So yes. Use your verbs, your objectives, and remember, acting is a possibility space, not a specific result. Provide the scene partner if you can. This is very, very rare in games. But if you can play selects from a prior session or have I know scheduling is tricky, but recording ensemble, meaning recording with your actors together, that's the best way to get real specific reactions to each other and know they're going to line up because they were there. It's a bonus. I encourage people to be strategic about this because it is a challenge, but don't write it off altogether. Give it a shot. Give it a try. Bonus, if you're feeling saucy. Meet them on their terms. I've just given you all this stuff, portrayed the child as like waiting for all this input and you have to bring them everything. Some actors have amazing instincts. They're master clue hunters in your file names and they can tell kind of what game state it is, based on what the file name is in the Excel spreadsheet. And they've just got really, really strong choices. They're just chomping at the bit. You can feel it. You can feel when an actor loves to read quickly and kind of stay in a flow. Get out of their way. That's what they need. You're there for whatever they need. The need is not for you to talk. It's for you to get them what they need. Sometimes you need to step back. Some actors respond differently to different kinds of cues. Sometimes they love lots of explanation that they'll digest and kind of internalize and turn into a character, and they may ask for that. Some really want it short and sweet. Ashley Birch is an example of an actor who is totally, for some reason, has the same pop culture references that I have, and so I can just kind of refer to scenes from like Community or whatever, and she'll be like, oh, got it, which is handy, but that's certainly not true of all actors. Match their energy. Human matching is really, really powerful. It makes us feel understood and seen, and our brain waves can actually align if you do it enough. So if it's an intimate scene, keep your vibe small, keep it gentle. Don't get huge and don't take, don't suddenly inject it with lots of, projection and whatever. Match the scene you're in. It'll help them stay in their flow. Share the vulnerability. My job, it's very reassuring and important that the actor feel like I know what we need or what's productive. But that doesn't mean that I always know exactly how to get it from them. And so I will try direction out as questions. What if we try this? Let's explore that. Maybe it's this. If not, all right. Oh, I pushed you down the wrong path. Let's try something else. It's not, I don't need to be seen as all important. And we're all just kind of discovering it together. So I share their vulnerability with them. I also often, because we don't have scene partners, I'm there to give them their feed lines. Something to react to. Now I'm also kind of acting. I'm trying not to take over the scene and make sure their choices are the ones that are driving the scene forward. But here I am. I'm also saying words and hoping that they'll affect you. I've done jumping jacks. You don't have to do jumping jacks. But I've asked an actor whose energy was a little bit low that I had a special relationship with to like do a few jumping jacks and kind of lift their energy. And I was like, screw it. I'll do the same. Let's go. It just helps them feel trusting when you share vulnerability with them. Genuine affirmation. Again, the booth is so sterile and so closed off, and all input is, desperately controlled. So don't hide resonating with their performance. I know the talkback might be closed, but open it if you are laughing at what they just did. That's a trick I learned from Eric Sturpey, actually. But yeah, in theater, some actors really, really thrive on vibing with the audience. So by the way, feel free to laugh at this talk. No, but some actors really, really feed off of this and find it really fuels their work. Not all actors are like that. but it always gives them the sense that they're on the right track and makes them feel like, like we're all being human beings together. And what they're doing is making me have a human response, which is the goal. So laugh if you're gonna laugh, cry, let them see you cry. I've done fist bumps, I've been like, sick, that was sick. If it's sick, say it's sick. So yeah, here they just have you to feed off of. So be their friend. Caution, I'm not gonna say don't do these things, just that they carry a cost. You'll see as we get further into this talk, I know I'm gonna be saucy and be like, don't do this, don't do that. You can do these things, but you have a budget. So, first thing to maybe avoid is repeating the same direction without adjusting it or giving them a relative orientation. Again, it's an emergent system. Give it new prompts, give it new parameters, run the sequence again. If nothing else, yeah, give them warmer or colder. That's helpful. But if you're just hammering on the same beat and they feel like they're probably trying different things to get you what you want and nothing's shifting it, it's very demoralizing. You have to know what you want. This is a very, very important director thing. If you don't know specifically what you want, make a very quick and rapid and reasonable thought-through decision of what's productive. I will just make a commitment. If I turn to the developer and the answer is, I'll make a call about what seems dramatically interesting and viable and will support a variety of settings as fast as I can and give the actor a sense of confidence that what they try next could be useful. Actors' takes aren't wrong. They're just further or closer to what you need for specific reasons. Micromanaging, puppeteering. This is going to be me attempting to describe a feeling that I've had in a couple of sessions. I'm going to do my best here. So it's about insistent technical detail that doesn't resonate with the child self. It's not about specifics. It's not about being too specific, because sometimes the right detail can evoke a huge mood. That's very powerful. That's very useful. But if the child, for whatever reason, can't visualize or connect with that detail, it feels abstract. It feels like they're reaching for the performance outside of yourself, to an expectation that you don't understand. You feel like the director is lifting each of your joints into place kind of individually, and you're making this adjustment and that one, and it's very uncomfortable. You feel like you're contorting yourself into a specific silhouette, and the character lies just on the other side or something. And if everything you try feels like it's a wrong or bad fit, it's very upsetting. You second guess what you're doing here. Why are you there? It's very uncomfortable. What you want is this. Yes, tailor-made for me. So the point is, again, this reaching feeling is what's uncomfortable. And so you as a director must find the character somewhere within the actor's performance, not outside of it. If you can't, you've already failed at casting, and secondarily at directing. It's not the actor's fault. Line reads. Do people know what line reads are? I should just say it. All right, line reads. All right, so results-based direction is describing how the line is supposed to sound instead of what it's supposed to do. We talked about verbs. Do this to your scene partner instead of sound like XYZ. A line read is when you say the line how you think it's supposed to sound. So results-based direction would be like, can it sound lower? Okay, that's something. And then a line read would be like, say line reads results-based direction, which, okay. So if you're a really good actor, maybe it won't sound cheesy like that. But again, we'll get into why, even if you're really a talented actor, it's not going to be as helpful as you think it is. And again, remembering how hard it is to be present and fully immersed when you're thinking about how you sound. You've now directed the actor to think about how they sound instead of be that character. Sometimes characters are thinking about how they sound, but that's different than the actor thinking about how the character sounds. Does that make sense? Cool. So here we go. This is me trying out a way of explaining why line reads aren't as helpful as you might think, and we're going to spend some time on it because I just hear them all the time. All right, our line, or maybe even our scene, is parkour. We have our parkour bro here. It's an environment with a goal and a path, maybe even multiple paths. The actor has come in blindfolded. Remember, sterile space, no game information, no and nothing. They can't see anything. So this is what it feels like to them. Can't see. If you tell this person to sound like XYZ, they won't make this course. You're basically being like, lift your hip now and do this now. And you're like, okay, there's no context, there's no coordination. It's very, very artificial and odd. So if you show them the course, if you already give them, if you give them the details in their environment, the obstacles, all of this other stuff, they can navigate. They're professionals. They have their own coordination and athleticism. They can get there. Again, if you're a good actor, they still don't have your body. I have had to tell a director, I don't have your voice, bro. Like, I can't live down here. It's not gonna work for me. I can't go as low as you can. That's not a tool I have. So they don't have your body and your biomechanics. So you usually are creating more work in the form of questions of what you actually want, what the line needs to achieve, than helping them by telling them how it's supposed to sound. I hope that makes sense. So, right. All right, we're gonna get into you again, and you can totally make fun of me if I'm completely wrong. Actors' deepest engines are in the realm of visualization, association, sense memory, and human experience. And these are some things that I've noticed, and I could be wrong, about some of the other engines that different developers, different specializations may have as the way that they think and approach things and the language that they use. And they're very, very, very cool, but they might not be helpful in this context. So writers. You have so much information. You're this incredible, detailed encyclopedia for the game. Sometimes that's exactly what I need. I need you to pull a specific entry, and you're right there with it. It's amazing. Sometimes it spans, through hundreds of in-game years. But the actor might be swamped if you dump everything on them, and the key is to know which detail is going to serve the immediate scene. You may know the many sides. Sometimes you know that a character is vastly complex and has all these different facets. But we talked about acting as reacting, and it's very difficult to have a strong, bold reaction to more than 1 to 3 things. After that, you're going to feel the person kind of caught trying to react to too many things at once. Audio directors, you know what sounds good, what's cool, what's engaging. Sometimes it's reasonable to talk about the sound when you're trying to make sure your cast sounds different from each other. That's totally fair. But we've already talked a little bit about the risk of acting and asking an actor to think about how they sound. So be cautious. Aesthetics. Cinematic leads. You have the cutscene so vividly in your head. You've got the rhythm of it, the editing of it, the beat of it, the visuals, the frame. So much is specific for you already in the work that when you bring to the session and you want to add the dialogue to that. But I have noticed that this has the most tendency to lead to line reads because, again, you're thinking of something very specific that you've already pre-shot. So all of these feelings and needs and languages, the needs behind them, the game needs behind them are completely, completely valid. So my job as a director is to respect the need that they represent. But I'm also sifting for gold in the language that these developers may use to find and translate that for what's useful to the actor. So that's kind of my job as a director, is to what is it that they actually need it to do behind the kind of way that they think they need it to sound. So sometimes I like it when people let me interrupt them so I can just quickly recap and distill something for the actor. Recap. If you take nothing else away from this talk, let it be this slide. Oh, my line, it was perfectly centered this morning. Okay. Anyway, yes, okay, if that still makes sense, explanation good, evocation best, demonstration worst. So work, start with evocation if you can, get into the details if you need, and as a last resort, sometimes there are reasonable reasons for last resorts, demonstrate. Moving on to the Guardian. More like guidelines, right. I've made all of these things sound like very, very intense rules, and you're going to break the immersion of the booth space for the child if you mess up. But the Guardian is still this grown-up element that understands the professional world and grown-up space. Actors aren't just fragile little dandelions most of the time. Certainly in game voiceover, not as many fragile egos. And so if you break some of these rules, the Guardian makes sure that it won't tank the whole session most of the time. So I've given some I've totally given very technical direction. Again, we talked about needing to talk about the sound if you need your characters to sound different so they read as distinct people. That's fine. I've even given line reads, totally have. I just tried to like do these other things first. And so my hope is by doing those other things first, filling in the environment and everything else, that the actor trusts me that it's going to be more of the exception than the rule, that I'm still looking for the performance inside of them and inside their instincts. Right, so here we go. This is how you get away with it, getting away with line reads. Back to our parkour bro. So if you give this line read without filling in the environment, the child wonders why, like what's happening. Inside them, the child is like, but where's the path? Like what is all of this other stuff I'm supposed to be visualizing? The read will sound, most of the time, if even I've given a line read and then been completely unsurprised when what I hear back is something that sounds stuck or flat. It has no kineticism. This is not parkour, this is a pose. It has no sense of purpose. But if you've already filled in the work, the terrain, the goal, where they're going, what it needs to do, you can ask for a specific stress if it makes the line make more sense. Now that this person is flowing this way, you can say, okay, here, drop your hip, or like take the weight in your shoulder. It's going to integrate into everything else that they're doing. It has context. They can kind of internalize it into the rest of their kinesthetic expertise. So it's not the worst thing in the world. Okay. So we talked a little bit about budget. So it's not that there are rules and don'ts, but be careful because they cost things. Actors have, just one more time, actors aren't babies. It sounds like I'm protesting too much. But yes, it's more that they have a finite amount of attentional resources, like your player. So where are you directing their attention and their energy? If you divert power to, I might start to mix metaphors here. If you divert power to shields in your ship, you have less for thrusters or immersion and intention. And if you totally don't put anything in thrusters, you're going to stall out. That's when you have a flat read. The Guardian will often pull, the Guardian again, from experience, from insight, from intellect, can pull from their back pocket of tropes and stereotypes and things that they've heard in games before and all kinds of stuff, if you aren't there to provide it for yourself. But it's not the bespoke, kind of specific experience that you might be hoping for your game. So yeah, it takes energy for the Guardian to kind of translate, taking those tropes and feeding it to the child to be like, hey, believe in this. It can do that, but it takes some energy. So don't waste CPUs. This is when the Guardian is working way too hard to engage or protect, God forbid, protect the child. That's a situation, we got into that with the micromanaging, puppeteering, that sense when the actor starts to believe that the performance doesn't live inside of them, that they have to go finding it somewhere elsewhere and they're not pleasing you or they're not finding it for you. Then the Guardian has to work overtime to tell that child that they're still okay, they should stay in the playpen, stay relaxed, stay playful. They're kind of distracting them and encouraging them and hugging them. There's like so much work that happens when an actor feels unsafe. And it's not that they're babies, but it's a waste of energy. You're wasting their energy and you're wasting everyone's time. So I'm not a big fan of that like abusive style, as you can tell. Technical direction, directing the Guardian. Again, the Guardian's like, no problem, less breathy? Sure. Why not? I'm not offended. I have to explain this to the kid. It's going to be fine. We're fine. Absolutely. But the kid's like, why? If we know kids, we know they ask why incessantly. They have to know why. And it's fair. It's fair to ask why. It's your job to know why. As a director and as a developer. If the child doesn't have a satisfactory why, either from you or for the Guardian compensating for you, the read lacks ownership. We've just talked about this. So this is the sound of reading or copying. The words will sound like they came from outside of that character, from a page, or from you. So again, much of my job as a director is asking developers to explain why. Usually, ideally in in-game context. Sometimes it comes to you like, the player is right, the player is moving quickly away and it has to sound fast, whatever. I make up a why that I think the child will react to, something that they can play with. So, getting into that, how to augment your technical direction for the Guardian while including the child, if you can. Faster becomes they're chasing you. Your ally is in danger. That is a reason for speed, that you can actually act. Both add meaningful urgency. I use verbs. I like to use verbs, not always, but I like to use verbs in direction, again, not just for them to do as actors, but also as a request. So instead of, I say, the read needs to be less breathy, this is focusing on the result, I'll be like, can we take the breath out? As a question, see what happens. Can I engage you in the process of attempting to take out the breath? That just respects them as craftsmen and says, can you attempt to do this thing instead of, can you make me that? Better, better is finding a child why. Again, this is a bit of association that I hope the actor will follow me with. But folks who are nervous, they lack their breath. It might be more breath. They're reaching for their breath more. Folks who are confident, speaking confidently and fully relaxed, breathing no longer becomes a weird artificial process. It sounds, you hear it less. And again, line reads as a last resort, if you can. This is the end. Oh my God, we did it. Well, yay. Summary. That was all very complicated. Hopefully this is simple. Create a safe, exploratory space for the actor to have agency and ownership of this process, even though they're there for only 4 hours. You can do it. Feed their imagination and give them things to spontaneously and authentically react to, if you can. If the above conditions are met, you can get away with some technical direction, so long as they believe that the performance that you're trying to get is inside of them. Maybe hire a director, I don't know. Honestly, if you just did nothing but take away this talk and have, you can't afford a director and you need to do it yourself, I hope that this helped you and you can have just an appreciation for the process in a way that brings you closer to how your actors, what your actors are experiencing. I think it could be really helpful. And if you can afford a director, maybe you've gotten a sense of what some of this art and skill involves and what that act of translation is between developer and actor. And so, yeah, if you learn now how to hire directors, what to look for and what they should be doing and what the effect should be having on your actor, that would also be valuable. So hopefully you've taken one of these things away from this. Thank you so much. Hit me with your hot cues.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was incredibly useful.
Oh, good.
So we're going a little bit into lunch now, but we can take a couple of quick questions. But I think, Sarah, you'll be around during lunch if anyone needs to grab you.
Hello.
Hello. This was much more useful than I initially thought, so thank you very much for that. As a person who is not directly working with actors or anything, but still now going into more general game direction, so from that standpoint. And my question is mostly, in this case, it's a lot about, you were talking a lot about more like humans talking to each other and stuff, but what do you think of cases where it's, for example, creatures or games where there is no specific speech, but still needs to be some acting done for the to show the character of the creatures, for example, or things like that, like how to direct in those type of cases?
I love directing creature sessions. I got to do, for Fortnite, I got to direct D. Bradley Baker, who's like a legend. He's like the creature guy, and he's a genius. And he's an actor. He's famous for doing creatures, but he will ask you character-based questions. I mean, the secret is that if you want your player to have a human reaction to something, even if it's not a human being, you need to create a human associative, kind of like a human-like psychology, and that will connect you to them. If what you want is to connect empathetically to that animal, creature, whatever. So I work with D like any other actor. Just because the words are different or he's speaking gibberish, it's still acting stuff. I'm like, hey, this is your attitude, this is your mood, this is your goal, all that other stuff, it's the same. And it's the same when I've directed across languages that I don't understand. And obviously it would be way better if I did. I could be a little more precise. But we can appreciate acting in foreign languages with subtitles and whatever. So that is the same kind of fundamental instinctive human connection response. So I can understand the intention of an actor when they're speaking in a different language. I can understand the mood, the energy that they give me. And so I can reflect that back to them in the form of direction. So it's the same tools, even if they're not English words or even real language.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Right, I'm afraid this will need to be the last
I'm so
one,
sorry.
so we've just got a quick...
I timed it. It was like 40 minutes. What happened? Okay.
Hi. I want to say it's a lovely talk. And
Thanks.
I'm just wondering, you're a voice director, and how much detail do you get from the characters, from the developers, when, like, are you making the character, or are they like they have the picture, or do you have the picture? How is it intended?
Usually I'm not at the point of character creation with them in part of that process. So they will provide me with character art. Oh my God, I didn't even talk about character art. Show them character art. Ugh, do that. Part of their visualizing, very key. So they will provide me with the character, art and description. Sometimes it happens in the session, and I'm making very gut sort of instinct reactions to that, and then responding to what the actor's giving me, because they already liked, presumably if I wasn't involved in casting, the developer liked something about that actor's audition, so I'll kind of also tend to trust what they're giving me. But because I don't tend to get scripts as far in advance as I would like, and I'm used to it as an actor, a lot of it's very reactive and on the fly. Okay. But I'm always checking, especially for the top of a session. I might turn to my developers more frequently than later in a session, because I'm still asking and paddling myself and the actor towards what they need, and then eventually we'll start to pick up speed when I think I really got it. So,
okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Brilliant. Thank you. I mean, this is a perspective we really don't get to hear usually at conferences, so it's incredibly useful, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you very much.